Hello and welcome to this new episode of the WCO Integrity Webseries hosted by the Anti-Corruption and Integrity Promotion Program. As you know, our purpose here is to invite customs experts from around the world and shed some light on issues relating to integrity in customs. This week, we will discuss the links between gender and integrity, and to do so, we have here with us today Joanna Törnström, WCO lead on the topic.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to discuss this important and interesting topic.
Thank you, Joanna. As an introduction, I would like to tell our listeners that over the past year and a half, the WCO Virtual Working Group on Gender Equality and Diversity that you are leading organized 2 meetings dedicated to the topic of integrity. It was co-organized by the ACID program and gathered about 20 WCO members who shared their experience on how to mainstream gender equality within customs administration in an integrity perspective.
Absolutely. We've had 2 very successful meetings with great participation from our members. What we did prior to these meetings was that we gathered information from various reports and studies on the links between gender equality and integrity. And on this slide, you will see 3 statements that shows the basis of our discussions. Basically, what we first found out from these studies is that women experience, perceive, and are affected by corruption in different ways than men, which is something that needs to be taken into consideration when designing strategies to prevent corruption. Secondly, corruption creates additional obstacles for women in accessing and using public goods, including basic services, and that can also lead to an increase in gender inequalities as a result of its correlation with poverty. And thirdly, developing a better understanding of the links between gender equality, diversity, and integrity is essential for designing effective strategies to address potential gaps. This being said, we are of course aware that there are a lot of other concepts and ideas around the topic of gender and corruption, some that are valid and others less so. And this is why we wanted to discuss this in our meetings with the WCO Virtual Working Group on Gender Equality and Diversity.
Before you continue, Johanna, I would just like to underline that those 3 statements, these 3 concepts, and the justification behind them are the fruit of extensive research from the field of academia, who have also studied many of the other concepts we will be discussing today. We can mention think tanks such as U4, who have provided great analysis on the topics of gender and corruption, or the OECD, UNDP, and Transparency International, all of whom the WCO is working with on this topic and other important topics.
Absolutely. And what we are about to discuss relies both on that research and on the inputs that we gathered from the WCO members. The first concept that we often hear is that women are less corrupt than men. In customs, this idea comes from the fact that when looking at reports of corruption from customs internal affairs departments, we see that in general, there are much more men that are being accused of being corrupt than women. However, what we must first take into account is that in most countries, there are more male customs officers than female. And then it makes sense that there are on average more men than women that are also involved in corruption. Instead, what we really need to do is to look at this proportionally. And to do so, I would like to underline the importance for customs to make sure that they can always disaggregate their data by gender. There is no evidence showing that women are inherently less corrupt than men. Instead, and this is also what was concluded in our conversations with our members, part of the virtual working group, there are other factors to take into consideration, including the political and institutional context, culture, and gender inequality, which can all explain the linkages between female representation and the levels of corruption. The concept women perceive corruption differently than men is linked to that. Reports shows that women are less involved in bribery. There is also research showing that when engaging in corruption, women are also significantly less aggressive in the amounts that they extract than their male counterparts. It has also been proven that women appear to be more vulnerable to punishments and the risks involved in corruption due to social norms and perceptions. During our meetings, some members argued that women may also be more risk adverse and afraid of the consequences of engaging in corrupt behavior due to social norms, and therefore more likely to be compliant. Other members said that culturally, women may not have the same negotiation skills as their male counterparts as a way to negotiate their way out of punishment, which could be an incentive not to engage into corrupt activities.
The last two statements you share can actually reinforce gender stereotypes, but it is true that feedback from the participants indicated that those cultural aspects should be kept in mind when addressing the issues of gender and corruption in certain countries.
And this leads us to another concept around gender and corruption, which is that women are less exposed to situations where there might be occasions to be corrupt. During our meetings, we all agreed that integrity may be more a question of exposure rather than gender. As women lack access to resources, women may also be less targeted by demands for bribes and less likely to indulge in corrupt transactions. Also, in many countries, women occupy to a less extent frontline positions at the border and are more often employed in back office administrative positions, and therefore, women are also less exposed to situations where there might be occasions to engage in corruptive behaviors. However, it should be noted that this assumption is only true in some countries, because in other countries, there is actually a high share of women among customs staff, including in frontline positions. From a gender equality perspective, it is important for customs to identify potential factors preventing women from taking frontline positions at the border. For instance, it is very important that customs ensures the safety of its employees and acknowledge that these needs might be different for women.
Absolutely, and I would like to mention that the WCO ACIP program conducted at the beginning of the year a customs integrity perception survey in 10 countries, aiming at assessing the perception of customs integrity by customs officers as well as private sector stakeholders. When participants answered the survey anonymously, they had to indicate their gender. And when analyzing the data, which is now confidential, it showed that male respondents did not act above the laws any more than female respondents would do, thus showing that it is a misconception to think that women are inherently less corrupt than men.
Indeed, and this is why it's always so interesting to have concrete studies from the ground, like this one from the WCO ACIP program. Now let's move on to our next slide. Corruption has an impact on gender equality. In fact, beyond the sector of customs, gender inequality has an impact on corruption and vice versa. Corruption tends to worsen in gender inequality. Addressing gender in anti-corruption policies therefore makes sense from an economic and development perspective. In this regard, it is also extremely important to ensure that all information is available and accessible to everyone, customs staff as well as the private sector. In some cases, women can become easier targets to corruption just because they might be less aware of their rights and less likely to report abuse. It is therefore very important that customs make sure that information is available for all, and that all stakeholders, regardless of their gender, have access to the necessary knowledge or means to report corruption or to file complaints. By ensuring that information is available to all, customs administrations can foster a culture of accountability and compliance. Finally, moving on to our last gender and integrity concept, women and men are not subject to the same type of corruption. Actually, reports show that women are to a higher extent subject to other forms of corruption, including harassment, sexual assault, and violence. These acts often go unpunished as they are associated with a lot of shame and in most cases not recognized as corruption.
Thank you for all of this, Johanna. Now let's move to the second part of our episode, how customs can integrate a gender perspective in the fight against corruption. To do so, you relied on two very important tools of a WCO to promote gender equality and integrity, the Gender Equality Organizational Assessment Tool, GOAT, and the revised Arusha Declaration.
Exactly. Basically, we looked at several key factors of the revised Arusha Declaration, which focuses on integrity, and ways to promote gender equality, which is with the support of the WCO Gender Equality Organizational Assessment Tool. Starting with the key factor from the revised Arusha Declaration, leadership and commitment, it is indeed key to have a strong commitment from senior management to promote both integrity and gender equality as cross-cutting enablers, and also to implement gender mainstreaming holistically within the administration, promoting an organizational culture building on strong values such as transparency and fairness. Regarding transparency, and coming back to the conversation we had earlier, the importance of ensuring equal access to information was certainly something that was identified as key among our members when it comes to promoting both integrity and gender equality, both with regards to internal information within the organization as well as external information targeting the public and different stakeholders. This can sometimes include making proactive efforts to ensure that customs reach out to certain groups of the society. And several of our members have showed creativity in this regard, developing new innovative ways to reach the public, for instance, via mobile applications and engaging in online platforms. Moreover, human resource management is another important factor when talking about integrity and gender, mainly because there is so much that can be done. Our members mentioned, for instance, the need to have clear human resource management policies, recruitment based on merit, to provide equal access to training, equal rules from penalization, etc. There are different examples of how this can be implemented, and as the context varies a lot depending on the countries, there is no one model that fits all. However, the essence is to ensure fairness in recruitment, career development, and salary setting, for instance, while having clear and transparent policies in place.
The revised Arusha Declaration includes 10 key factors, but unfortunately we do not have the time to mention them all here in order to connect them with gender mainstreaming. The last one, however, relationship with the private sector, is a very important one.
It is indeed very important for customs to consult broadly with various stakeholders, including with associations representing the interests of small and medium enterprises, as well as women traders in those countries where such association exists. It is equally relevant to provide access to a complaints mechanism which can be accessed by anyone. Also, as previously mentioned, it is important that customs make sure that all stakeholders have equal access to information on customs policies and procedures. And this sometimes involves taking proactive efforts to engage with different groups of the population. This can be done through consultations and collaboration, for instance. In this regard, some of our members have carried out specific trainings targeting women traders and others targeting persons with disability.
Thank you for all of this, Johanna, and for taking the time to record this episode with us. I know you have a lot of work with the WCO Gender Equality and Diversity portfolio. It means there is interest from our members, and this is very encouraging for the future of customs. Thank you everyone for listening to this new episode, and we'll see you soon. Bye.